You did it last night, almost certainly. If you watched television in the evening, if you read on a tablet or a phone before bed, if the light in your living room was still bright at 9 in the evening, or if any screen was on while you sat in the same room, you sent your brain a signal. Not a subtle signal, not one that required misinterpretation. A signal as clear, as strong, and as specific as the one your brain receives at noon on a cloudless summer day. A signal that told your brain's most ancient timekeeping system, the system that has been reading light to determine the time of day for hundreds of thousands of years, that it was the middle of the day. Respond accordingly. And your brain, which has no way to verify that the clock says evening, responded accordingly. It suppressed the hormone responsible for protecting your neurons and clearing the waste that accumulates in them during the day. It allowed the hormone that, over years of nightly elevation, specifically damages the memory center of your brain to remain higher than it should have been. It activated an inflammatory pathway that, in research now confirmed across multiple models, directly accelerates the biological markers of brain aging. You did this last night, and the night before, and with very high probability, every evening for the last several years. The question this video answers is not whether this is happening. It is happening. The question is exactly what it is doing, and what you can change tonight, in your living room, that costs almost nothing and will begin to reverse it. At around the 8-minute mark, I am going to tell you about a conflict that nobody has explained to you. A conflict between two pieces of advice that you may have both been given, one for your safety, one for your health, that are, in their evening consequences for your brain, working in directly opposite directions. I am going to name both sides of that conflict, and I am going to tell you the simple number, printed on your light bulbs or available in 30 seconds online, that tells you which side of the conflict your home is currently on. I have spent more than 3 decades in geriatric medicine. The research on light timing and brain aging is among the most rapidly developing areas in the field I have followed throughout my career. What has moved in the last 5 years is not the hypothesis that light timing matters. That hypothesis has been established for decades. What has moved is the precision, specific pathways, specific wavelengths, specific Kelvin numbers, and specific interventions that are cheap enough and immediate enough that every person watching this video can act on them tonight. Let me give you a way to hold what I'm about to explain. Before electricity existed, your ancestors' world went dark at sunset. The light available after dark, a candle, a hearth, a fire, produced wavelengths so close to the red and infrared end of the spectrum that the cells in the eye responsible for reading the time of day barely registered it. The distinction between day and night was unambiguous. Blue spectrum light flooded in at dawn. Red-orange light was all that remained after dark. The brain's timekeeping system received one clear signal, repeated perfectly every day of every year. Daytime is blue, nighttime is dark, or red-warm. Your brain still expects this. The system that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to read the spectrum of light as its primary time signal has not been updated for the LED revolution of the last decade. The television screen in your living room at 9 in the evening is emitting light at wavelengths the brain cannot distinguish from midday sun. To the specific photoreceptor cells in your retina that send the time signal to your brain's master clock, your living room at 9 o'clock is indistinguishable from noon in an open field. And your brain, receiving a noon signal, does exactly what it evolved to do at noon. It suppresses melatonin. It keeps cortisol elevated. It prepares for wakefulness and activity. It does all of this at the exact hour when the opposite cascade should be unfolding, when melatonin should be rising to its protective peak, when cortisol should be falling to its nighttime low, when the brain's restoration and repair processes should be initiating. Let me be specific about what happens in the body when this goes wrong, because the mechanism is more serious than most people have been told. Melatonin is not simply a sleep hormone. It is a neuroprotective molecule, a direct antioxidant within brain tissue that scavenges the reactive oxygen species generated by daily neuronal activity. In adults over 65, melatonin production is already reduced, by some estimates, 70 to 90% below the levels of young adulthood. This reduced production is one of the reasons the aging brain is more vulnerable to oxidative stress and inflammation. When evening light suppresses melatonin further, or delays its release by 2 to 3 hours, which research on screen exposure has consistently documented, the brain's primary antioxidant signal is absent at exactly the hours when it should be present. The reactive oxygen species accumulate. The oxidative damage accumulates, and this happens every night, compounding across months and years into a measurable acceleration of brain aging. The second mechanism is cortisol. Cortisol follows a precise daily rhythm, high in the morning, falling through the day, reaching its lowest point in the early night. In a body with an intact circadian system receiving correct light signals, evening brings the cortisol suppression that allows the brain to enter its restorative night phase. When evening light prevents this suppression, keeping cortisol elevated past 10 or 11 at night, the hippocampus is exposed to hours of cortisol activity that it should not receive. This matters specifically to memory. The hippocampus, which is essential for the formation and retrieval of new memories, is among the most cortisol-sensitive structures in the brain. Prolonged or inappropriately timed cortisol exposure shrinks hippocampal volume. This has been demonstrated in chronic stress research, in shift worker studies, and increasingly in research on circadian disruption specifically. The hippocampal damage from nighttime cortisol is dose-dependent and cumulative. It does not announce itself as it accumulates. It simply reduces, year by year, the tissue available for the memory functions the hippocampus was supposed to provide. The third mechanism is the one that surprised me most when I first encountered the research. There is a molecular pathway in the brain, a master inflammatory regulator called NF-kappa B, nuclear factor kappa B, that governs the activation of genes involved in neuroinflammation and immune response. Under normal circadian conditions, NF-kappa B activity in the brain is suppressed during the nighttime hours, allowing the anti-inflammatory restoration processes of sleep to proceed unimpeded. Research in animal models, and increasingly in human-relevant contexts, has shown that light exposure during the biological nighttime directly activates NF-kappa B in brain tissue, not through sleep disruption alone, through a direct photosignaling pathway. The light reaches the retina. The signal travels via the optic nerve, and the brain's inflammatory master switch is activated at the hour it should be suppressed. The neuroinflammation that follows is not a consequence of poor sleep. It is a direct consequence of light in the wrong place at the wrong time, operating through a mechanism that is independent of whether the person ultimately sleeps. I want to tell you about a patient I worked with. No name, because the pattern belongs to many, not one. They were 71 years old. They lived alone in a home they had maintained carefully for decades. It was well lit. They had replaced the bulbs with LED lighting throughout and kept the living room bright, as they had been advised to do. They watched television each evening, as most people do, until around 11. They slept with a small amount of ambient light in the bedroom because complete darkness unsettled them. They had seen a neurologist for a mild cognitive complaint 18 months earlier. The scan at that time had shown brain atrophy consistent with someone 5 to 6 years older than their chronological age. The neurologist had attributed this to vascular risk factors and noted it was not outside the range of variation. The patient had accepted this and moved on. When I looked at their evening routine, specifically their light environment, the picture that emerged was of a home that was, from the perspective of the brain's light reading system, noon until 11 o'clock every night. Over 14 weeks, 3 specific changes were made. The bulbs in all evening use rooms were replaced with warm white LEDs rated at 2700 Kelvin. A blue light filter was enabled on the tablet used for reading, the warm tone setting at maximum reduction. The bedroom was made fully dark. Standby indicator lights covered, street light blocked by blackout lining. The digital clock replaced with a battery-operated analog one that produced no light. 3 months later, an inflammatory marker panel was repeated. High-sensitivity CRP had fallen 31% from baseline. The patient's own observation of the change was not the cognitive sharpness that might have been expected. It was something harder to name but more immediately convincing. The specific exhaustion that had sat behind their eyes each morning, the depletion that no amount of sleep had been resolving, had begun to lift. Not fully, but measurably, and in a direction that had not moved in years. The light environment in their home had not changed in a decade. No one had mentioned it as a clinical variable. Now, the 8-minute mark, the conflict I told you about. Falls are the leading cause of serious injury in adults over 65. The clinical advice to prevent falls is well established and entirely correct. Keep the home well lit. Ensure all rooms have adequate light. Reduce shadows and dark patches where a fall risk might go undetected. This advice prevents fractures. It saves lives. It is right. And it is in the evening hours, when combined with LED lighting at color temperatures above 3000 Kelvin, contributing to exactly the cascade of brain aging mechanisms I have been describing. The advice to keep the home well lit does not specify what kind of light, or what color temperature, or what time of day that lighting should be at full brightness. It simply says, keep the home well lit. And most people, and most senior living facilities, and most families retrofitting an aging parent's home have interpreted this as bright LED lighting throughout the home throughout the evening. The fall prevention advice and the brain aging protection advice are in direct conflict in the evening hours, and nobody has sat down with most older adults to explain both sides of that conflict at the same time. The resolution is not to dim the lights to the point of fall risk. It is to change the type of light. A warm white bulb at 2700 Kelvin, at the same brightness level as a daylight bulb at 5000 Kelvin, provides equivalent illumination for fall prevention while emitting a fraction of the blue wavelength light that suppresses melatonin and activates the inflammatory pathways I have described. The number that matters is Kelvin. It is printed on every light bulb package. It is available by searching the product name of any bulb currently in your home. Above 3000 Kelvin, blue light emission significant. Below 2700 Kelvin, warm spectrum, minimal circadian disruption in the evening. The difference between a 6500 Kelvin bulb and a 2700 Kelvin bulb is, to the brain's light-sensitive cells in the evening, the difference between standing in bright sunlight and sitting by a low fire. And here is one final finding that I want to make sure you leave with, because it is among the most striking in the recent sleep light literature. A study examining the effects of sleeping in moderately lit environments, not bright rooms, moderate ambient light, found that adults who slept in rooms with even low-level light showed significantly higher fasting glucose and insulin resistance the following morning, compared to those who slept in complete darkness. This is not a study about sleep quality. It is a study showing that light during sleep, even the standby light from a television, even the glow from a streetlight through thin curtains, produces measurable metabolic consequences from a single night of exposure. The brain is not the only organ that suffers when light arrives at the wrong time. The entire metabolic system is disrupted by the same signal. Tonight, at no cost beyond a light bulb and a settings change on a screen, you can begin to change what your evening is doing to your brain. Not next month. Tonight. 3 things. Each one takes less time than a television program. The first is the 7 p.m. warm light switch. Replace the bulbs in every room you use between 7 in the evening and bedtime with warm white LEDs rated at 2700 Kelvin or below. On packaging, these are labeled warm white or soft white. Avoid cool white, bright white, and daylight ratings. All of these exceed 3000 Kelvin. The entire living room of a typical home can be addressed for under $20 in bulb costs. This is the single highest impact structural change available because it requires no ongoing behavioral discipline. Once the bulb is changed, it works every evening automatically. The second is the screen warm protocol. On every smartphone, tablet, and computer you use in the evening, enable the warm color setting. Night shift on Apple devices, night mode or adaptive display on Android, f.lux or similar on computers, and on televisions, reduce brightness to below 40% of default and enable any warm tone picture mode available. These settings shift the screen output toward yellow and red wavelengths. Additionally, implement a personal guideline, not as a rule to be broken by an exception, but as a default, of no screens within 90 minutes of your intended sleep time. The melatonin suppression from a screen used within 90 minutes of sleep onset has been documented at levels sufficient to delay sleep by approximately 2 to 3 hours. The third is the complete darkness audit. Walk into your bedroom tonight at 10 in the evening with all the lights off and the door closed. Stand there for 30 seconds. Your eyes will adapt. What light can you see? The standby indicator on a television or cable box. Cover it with a small piece of electrical tape. The street light coming through curtains, a black outlining insert, available for under $10, addresses this. The digital display on a clock. Replace it with a battery-operated analog clock that produces no light, or turn it face down. Each source of light your dark-adapted eyes can detect in that room is a source the brain's light-reading cells can also detect during sleep. Go back to where this video began. You did it last night. The television was on, the lights were bright, the tablet was in your hands, and your brain that evolved in a world where evening meant fire and night meant darkness, received a noon signal at 9 o'clock. It responded accordingly. It suppressed the molecule that protects your neurons. It kept the hormone that damages your memory center elevated past the hour it should have fallen. It activated the inflammatory pathway that, night after night, year after year, adds measurable momentum to the rate at which the brain ages. You did it last night, but what you do tonight can be different. And the difference between last night and tonight is a $20 set of light bulbs and a settings menu on a screen. If someone you know, a parent, a sibling, a friend, has been told that their cognitive changes are consistent with their age, and they are living in a bright LED home watching television until late in the evening, please share this video with them. Because the light in their home is a clinical variable that has never been brought into their medical conversation. And it should be. Tonight, before you turn on the television or pick up your phone, I want you to stand in your living room and find the Kelvin rating of your light bulbs. It is on the packaging if you still have it, on the label if it is visible or available in 10 seconds by searching the exact bulb name or brand. Find the number followed by K. Write it down. If that number is above 3,000, your living room is sending your brain a noon signal at 9 o'clock every evening. And next week, I'm going to walk you through a complete home light evaluation and protocol, room by room and device by device, with specific product recommendations and the settings to change, so that your home environment supports your brain rather than ages it. It takes one afternoon. Most of it costs under $20. Bring your Kelvin number. Come back next week. One important note before you go. Everything in this video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for the guidance of your personal physician. The changes described, light bulb replacement, screen settings, bedroom darkness, are appropriate for most healthy adults and carry no medical risk. However, if you are managing a condition that requires specific lighting, or if any recommendation here conflicts with fall prevention advice you have received from a healthcare provider, please discuss the balance between these considerations with your doctor before making changes. The goal is not to reduce the safety of your home. It is to change the type of light in it, which can address both concerns simultaneously with the right product choices.